Welcome to Tales from the Heart, a podcast from the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, and I am Lisa Salberg, your host today, and I am joined by the casual Steve Omen, but we'll add the Dr. Steve Omen there. Good morning, Steve. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. We're ending June, which is always kind of a nice thing for me to do. June's a stressful month, but it's the topic of the month for us for June is exercise, activity, recreation, vacation. Like we're all going into summer now. Doing that with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy can be a little challenging. So I was hoping that we could kind of talk about summertime entertainment and exercise in HCM in 2024. These new guidelines that came out 2 months ago, we talked a little bit more specifically about exercise. Can you tell us a little bit about the updates to the guidelines, and are we at the destination point, or are we still evolving in the area of exercise in HCM?
I think we're still in evolution from an era where alarming data on a group of patients who had died from HCM was probably inadvertently applied to all human beings who have HCM who are just trying to exercise and not compete at the elite levels. And that's the history. But where we've gotten in 2020, we recognized in the guidelines that mild to moderate exercise as part of a healthy lifestyle, like all adults are supposed to get, is also beneficial to people who happen to have a diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. You get the same cardiovascular benefits, you get the same mental health benefits, you get the same whole life benefits from being an active versus a sedentary individual. In 2024, in the interval, there was more data that came out from the LIVE HCM trial, from other exercise data, that now we didn't see a strong signal that even more vigorous exercise was dangerous for HCM patients. So the guidelines now read that mild to moderate exercise is recommended for all patients with HCM. And if they have symptoms that get in their way, then that's a call for us to be more aggressive in the therapies they're doing. But that more vigorous exercise can be considered or is reasonable for most patients with HCM. And just to be clear what we're talking about there, vigorous in these definitions in the study were at least an hour of work of achieving 6 METs, which is basically an hour a week of jogging or hiking uphill, something like that. So it's not like it's extreme high intensity interval training, some sort of crazy intervals, but it means you aren't stuck to just strolling. You can do a little bit more, and the data would suggest there's safety there. What's not different is we still felt like the decision about whether to be a competitive athlete on a professional or collegiate or high school team really still needs to involve a comprehensive discussion, weighing the risks and benefits, what we know, what we don't know, and individualizing that decision for each person. So that we kept that as a class 2B or maybe considered, so that therefore those conversations were held between the patients, their families, and doctors who know both HCM and sports medicine can weigh in to help that individual make a decision. That really is the minority of people. And the big news is that most people with HCM can exercise like everyone else is supposed to.
For those who've been diagnosed a long time, that's a culture shift. And that means you might have to go learn how to safely exercise. You might need some guidance in getting the motor running again and knowing what's normal and what's safe. And what normal shortness of breath should feel like with exercise versus your HCM shortness of breath. So I've been really encouraging patients to have deep conversations with their care providers, maybe getting a short-term exercise prescription. So maybe you can get a couple of rounds of rehab. Whether or not insurance is going to pay for all of that or not, that's a secondary issue, and it may be an out-of-pocket expense for some, but a very worthy one. Work with your teams and create the system that works for you and your anatomy. Any other brilliant ideas?
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that getting that regular exercise is not an emergency. It is a long-term goal. So if you take someone who hasn't been exercising, either because they've been unable to physically or because they were recommended not to and now the recommendations have changed from their teams, is start low and grow slowly. If you try to exercise an hour a day when you haven't been doing it, you're going to stop exercising because you're not going to feel good the next day. And so it's if you can walk for 15 minutes before you have to stop and rest, great. do that once or twice a day. And next week, do 16 minutes once or twice a day and gradually build from there. If you are someone who has obstructive HCM, start drinking water a half an hour before your exercise session so that you are hydrated, pre-hydrated, and hydrate along the way. That will help you achieve these types of things. So again, it's not an urgency that you get to an hour of exercise. You start where you can and you gradually build up from there. Because remember, many patients have had years of getting deconditioned. It's going to take a long time to get reconditioned.
Go slow, get help. Don't be your goal to be a half marathon or a 10K. Walk a 5K. Make that your goal, just to be able to walk that. And then maybe you can jog it at some point. Go slow. And maybe that's even too big of a goal for you. Walking 10, 15, 20 minutes, add. I like the step counter. It keeps me honest. If I only did 5,000 steps that day, I got to go out for a walk. And then I get to my 10,000 and I try to get there as frequently as I can. And some days I blow it away and some days I don't quite make it.
Yep.
But that's okay too. While somebody with HCM is considering what exercise to do, what impact does the weather and heat and humidity have on the HCM heart?
Yeah, it's really important. So again, for people who have obstructive HCM specifically, the humidity makes us vasodilate, which means you've got less blood in your heart, so your heart is more likely to obstruct early in exercise, so you're more likely to have symptoms. The idea of maybe exercising early or late in the day when it's less hot, less humid, and again, pre-hydrating and rehydrating as part of that exercise is important. People who have non-obstructive HCM still have a tendency to have more symptoms when it's hot and humid, but I kind of think we all do, whether we have HCM or not. But patients who have non-obstructive HCM are more likely to have symptoms as well. So again, I think the idea is just good general advice is work out early in the day before the heat and humidity is so intense, or in the evening, and just make sure you're fueling and hydrating properly.
So an activity such as, pickup game of beach volleyball with your friends versus competitive beach volleyball with HCM in the summer, the level of intensity does matter here. And what should people be thinking about with intensity?
Yeah, I think that, and I've had this conversation many times, as you can imagine, it depends a bit on the personality of the person as well. So there are those among us who are highly competitive, and when we get into even a recreational contest, our will to win becomes very strong. But to be a healthy patient, you have to listen to the signals from your body that say things aren't right and either slow down or get substituted or something like that. And if you're the type of personality whose will to win is you're going to stop ignoring those signals from your body, you maybe should pass on that activity if your competitive fire takes over too much and puts you at risk for increasing your obstruction and having near fainting or fainting because you exercise too hard. One of the other things, your example sport, beach volleyball, recreational, often people include alcoholic beverages with that, which is going to compound the vasodilation you get both from the exercise and the humidity. So it is a recipe for more symptoms for patients if they are prone to that.
Steve, I'm having memories of meetings of past years, and probably my favorite talk of all times of yours with the slide that showed the Viagra, the champagne, and the hot tub, and the expectations may not be as you see, and the next scene was an ambulance driving away. So can we explain why this combination through your summer might be problematic?
When we're trying to dissipate heat through sweating, or our blood vessels vasodilate to get more blood to our skin so that heat can be passed out to the environment, that means there's less heart filling the blood with each heartbeat. So the septum and the mitral valve live closer together, which means they're more likely to obstruct, even with just standing up. Alcohol also causes vasodilation. That slide that I used to show with the Viagra, the PDE5 inhibitors, was a concern we had back in the day. We haven't really seen it play out in any significant way. Those medications do preferentially vasodilate certain arteries in order to help with erectile dysfunction, and in theory could cause vasodilation, but doesn't usually cause diffuse systemic vasodilation. So we haven't really seen that be a big issue, but a hot tub, which is hot, alcohol, which makes you vasodilate, a hot environment, and dehydration are all things that are just recipes for fainting.
And that's not what you want to do on a nice summer day. We want to stay hydrated. We want to keep ourselves cool. We want to stay active, but we don't want to push it too far to dehydrate ourselves to create the downstream of negative consequences. If you were to pick some activities for people with, let's just call them class 2, your average HCM, a little bit symptomatic, what are some of the good activities they can do over the summer that are safe for them?
Yeah, I mean, so again, things like walking are great. Riding a bike is helpful. It doesn't quite, you're not quite as vertical, so it's not as likely to happen. Swimming, water aerobics, all those kind of things, which can then help mitigate that heat environment if you're in the water and doing some sort of water exercise, water calisthenics, those type of things, that can be very helpful. Seated exercise of some kind, so recumbent biking or rowing or those types of things, again, done at the right intensity, can all be very healthful exercises.
I highly endorse kayaking. Kayaking is, I didn't really take it up until after my transplant, but I should have done it before. I could have done it with my HCM. It would have been okay because you're sitting down and it's nice and cool and you go at your own level. So kayaking and boating and swimming, obviously we want to always be with a buddy. Those are the good exercise tips for now. Talk a little bit about alcohol in summer. You know, we talked a little bit about sports activity, but what if somebody's just sitting on the back porch having their mint julep and enjoying a summer day? What should they be thinking about with alcohol?
Yeah, so we've kind of hinted at it already, but alcohol can lead to more symptoms in HCM. That warm feeling is vasodilation. The best thing is to, 1, be moderate, particularly if it's really hot. 2, to make sure that you are balancing that with non-alcoholic beverages so you're getting hydration. Alcohol doesn't hydrate you. It ends up dehydrating you. So if you're going to have some form of alcoholic beverage, the next one should be non-alcoholic. So you can kind of balance it that way. But the biggest thing is just moderation and caution, and listen to your body. If you're starting to feel funny, if you're starting to feel like you're a little bit lightheaded, if you start having more pounding palpitations, maybe put that drink down and get something else. Get a nice cold glass of water or something to help bring your body temperature down, get some more hydration in there.
So vacationing is supposed to be relaxing, but I think somehow Americans miss that message and we tend to do super activities on those days. Amusement parks, days on our feet, making the most out of that 24-hour vacation time. Not always the best thing for HCM. The nice beach relaxation might be a little bit better, but can we talk about amusement parks and rides and skating and all of that fun stuff?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that and I think you characterize it well, particularly with respect to American culture and how we've approached vacations. When we spend the money to go to this destination, we feel like we need to do everything every day to get our value out of that. And we tend to overschedule ourselves in an environment where typical food, water, hydration habits are not the same because you're in a different environment. So what you're used to having in your home or in your office, now you're out and fending for yourself and you're having so much fun that you don't pay attention to those kind of things. So the same habits that are important at home are important when you're on the road as well. So that includes proper portions and quality of food, proper portions and quality of hydrating beverages, proper portions and quality of sleep so that you're trying to be healthy. And Lisa, to your point, I think it's really good. Try not to overschedule yourself. Take some time to relax and make sure that you are checking in with how you feel. And don't, if there's something that you're not feeling right about, well, then just maybe skip the next thing.
And that can cause some family friction and dynamics. I was reading a book a while ago, Brene Brown, kind of resonate with her a bit on things, but setting expectations as a family or as a traveling group, you may not be traveling with your family, you might be traveling with your friends. Make sure everybody knows what they each want out of their vacation. Yep. And if somebody's like, I want to go touring everywhere, and somebody's like, whoa, don't be pissed off if I don't come with you every day, because I want to sit on a deck and read a book for a while and just let my body and mind relax. So setting expectations in advance of vacation can stop that feeling left out, or somebody's feeling like you don't want to be with them. You need the rest for your mind and body.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be flexible too, right? Because you might not have appreciated, despite all the pre-trip homework you did, how many stairs or hills there were to destination, or the lack of elevators or escalators in some venues. If you're a person who is impacted by those kind of things, you have to be flexible to flex out and forgiving of yourself for recognizing that's important for your health to do so, and not beat yourself up if you couldn't do something or couldn't keep up because you got into an environment that you couldn't have predicted.
So I recently had a business trip and I had a couple of hours of fun time in Lisbon, Portugal. I did my homework in advance. Now I can pretty much do what I want to do post-transplant with hills and whatnot, but there's some particularly hilly spots in Lisbon. And the easiest thing to do was an ounce of planning to have the Uber drop me at the top of the hill and walk down the hill to sightsee, as opposed to what most people do is get dropped at the city center and find themselves climbing the hill all day.
Yeah.
So a little bit of homework and Google Maps with the elevations on it, golden. I will warn people, if you're thinking of a Disney vacation, they've changed some of their rules recently. I've been hearing on social media that the Fast Pass disability access, they're limiting. So if you have a hard time standing for long periods of time in heat, you're going to have to go fight for your accommodations in some of these amusement parks now for alternative access or ride times, as they're starting to pull back because so many people are using these services that they don't have room for everybody anymore. So you have to really explain your need and then see what options they have available. But don't stand for extended periods of time to go on an amusement ride if it's really going to not make you feel well anyway. So just be careful there and know that the rules are changing. Just may want to do your research in advance, and good thing called Google helps you do that. Exercise in HCM, safer than we used to think. Competitive exercise may be possible for some, or athletic participation, with appropriate evaluation, screening, and emergency action planning. Vacation, you should time yourself, get rest, set expectations, don't overdo it, watch your alcohol. What other words of wisdom do we have for people to relax and have some fun this summer and not be worried about their heart?
Along those lines, probably avoid, the middle of the day, the 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. are the time to do the more relaxing things. Find some good books to read, have some great conversations, meet some people, learn about culture and those types of things. You don't have to be extraordinarily physically active, particularly if you're someone who has symptoms. So that's important. And again, the same travel advice for everybody. We all tend to party diet-wise, intake-wise, compromise our sleep when we go on those vacations. And there is a toll for that. And people who have any health concern have less resilience to recover with that or deal with that. So just really focus on making sure you are as good as you can be with having healthy habits while you're traveling.
We talked about being at the destination, but the traveling to destination. Being in a car for extended periods of time can be a little difficult on the body. You can get fluid in your legs. Flying on a plane, I still wear compression socks even in the middle of the summer because I know my body on a plane. But what about other considerations about flying and driving with a not perfectly stable heart?
Yeah, so again, there's a tendency not to drink enough water when we do that. Being on an airplane is dehydrating, so making sure you're drinking water. Again, something doesn't contain alcohol as your primary beverage while in flight. In cars, we have a tendency to try to get as far as we can and only stop. We're all competitive with how few stops we have to take on the way to somewhere. But so you have to.
I've got a small bladder. I know like every rest stop between here and
Yeah, but then it's important when you do stop that you do take a few minutes stretching your legs, walking around a little bit, just kind of readjusting from that sitting position to some other position. It doesn't have to be anything vigorous. You can even get out and do some stretching, those types of things, but just take the time. The beauty of doing a car trip is you're on your own schedule. And so you're not rushing to make the next gate or the next train departure or whatever. You have the ability to say, hey, we're not in a hurry. The campsite is ours, or the hotel room is ours, and we're going to spend a few more minutes here because this is a great place to hang out. The breeze underneath this tree is great, and be mindful and relax in those situations.
Keyword, be mindful. I don't know that everybody knows what that means.
It really is paying attention to right now. So if you are somewhere and there's a stream, listen to the stream and pay attention to the smells and sounds of the birds that are there, and listen to them and see if you can hear a new bird. It's getting you out of the pitfalls of worrying about what's to come or fretting on what has happened, and enjoying what's right now, that kind of gives your brain a reset and lets you reframe things. It's remembering that the person that you're with, if you're with somebody, pay attention to what they're saying and what they're doing, and not just planning where you're going to go next, but pay attention to how they're feeling. Have a decent conversation. It's savoring your food when you eat it, not shoving in the food because this is the time for a meal and I have to get this food in, but savor each bite, savor each sip. All those types of things can slow all your mental drama going down, which decreases the overall stress responses on your body. And so that's to me what mindfulness is.
And I think we all forget it. I think we are in the rush to get to the next destination, and we don't stop and think about the moment enough.
It's enjoying the journey. The journey is part of it, is the fun, and the goal is also fun, but it's not just all about the destination.
Stay in the moment. Probably about 5 years ago or so, I started to try to do daily meditation and daily mindfulness. I do not always succeed in my endeavors, but I do it more often than not. And just taking those few moments, I do tend to take more of them when I'm on vacation or when I'm even just traveling, because there's not as much daily stuff to get in my way. So I think it's a really important part of letting yourself heal from all of the stuff that we all go through, whether it be HCM related, transplant related, or just life related. Taking a few minutes to be kind to yourself, I think, is undervalued in our society. Take the minute. You also mentioned another really important thing, and that is sleep. Are you rested enough? If you want to try to be more active and exercise more, you've got to make sure you're getting that yin and yang balance, that you're getting good rest. And I don't think we talk enough about sleep and its impact on our cardiovascular health. Can we talk a little bit about that while I jumped in a rabbit hole I didn't intend?
Yeah. No, I mean, sleep is one of the pillars of wellness, of being a healthy person and improving your health span. Poor sleep is really detrimental to us. We need the sleep to recharge our brains, to recharge our psyches, for our bodies to recover from physical activities and those types of things. So it's crucial that we do that. There is a lot more of attention being paid to it now, which is great. And there are plenty of resources for people to get good coaching or good advice on improving their sleep. We do know that there are true sleep disorders that occur more commonly in patients with HCM, specifically things in the sleep apnea spectrum. And so most all of our patients get screened for that at some point. And if you have a true diagnosis, making sure that gets assessed and treated is important. Sleep apnea increases the stress on your body tremendously. It makes your body store fat, so you're not going to have a good weight loss journey if you have sleep apnea that's untreated. It makes your hypertension resistant to medications. Sleep apnea is a bad thing, but just poor sleep is almost as bad. And so there's a lot of discussion that, everyone talks about the 8 hours of sleep, and we know that's an average. Most adults fall into the 7 to 9 hour need on a daily basis. If you're consistently getting less than 7, and if you're consistently getting more than 9, there are often health detriments on both sides. There's a few key things that the people that are true sleep gurus that I try to learn from talk about, and that is your bedtime and wake up time should be consistent throughout the week. And that helps your body start to establish circadian rhythms or daily habits where your hormones are rising and falling at the right time. That promotes good sleep, but also promotes great cognition and great physical performance during the daytime. And the issue is if you sleep 2 hours later on the weekends, Monday comes around and you get up at your usual time and you've just destroyed that circadian weekend, and then you spend the next 2 days recovering for it. So it's almost self-fulfilling that you want to do that. So if your bedtime and wake up time are consistent, you need to do all the stuff like make sure your room is dark and not fall asleep watching TVs or screens or those types of things. Noise is important to try to minimize noise in your room. If you wake up in the middle of the night, if you're awake for more than 15 minutes, you should get out of bed and do something else that is calming. Don't lay in bed and worry about your sleep, because you actually habituate to being awake in bed, and then your body tends to like that. So you want to reinforce that bed is sleep full time. Before bed, you want to start tapering off on fluid intake 2 or 3 hours before bedtime, food intake 3 or 4 hours before bedtime. And for those of you who do use alcohol, it is better at happy hour than it's a nightcap. The nightcap helps you fall asleep, but it disrupts the cycles of sleep you go through at night, so they're not restful and they're not restorative. So if you have alcohol, have your drink at happy hour, then your body can metabolize it so it's ready for bed at bedtime the natural way. Lots of things on, room temperature should be cool, but if you take a warm bath or a warm shower a half an hour before bedtime, that will help you sink into sleep better. So there's all kinds of great helpful advice, but it's the consistency of wake up and bedtimes, dark, quiet rooms, minimize screens, and minimize intake of food and beverage before bedtime. And it's good to have sort of a wind down routine. So if you are an evening TV watcher, great, but maybe stop that about an hour before bedtime and do your meditation. That's a great time to do meditation, or to journal, or to do some stretching. Those are great kind of just starting to calm yourself down before you go to bed.
All good tips. I went on a sleep journey after my transplant and after the prednisone got out of my body. I'm like, how do I get back to sleeping like a normal person again? My Fitbit helped me keep my time. And now if it's like 10 minutes before my typical fall asleep time, like my body knows it, it feels it. And my wake up time, I wake up within 3 minutes of the same time every morning without an alarm clock. It is crazy. And my sleep is restorative. I can do all of my measurements, and I darkened my room. I got blackout shutters because my neighbor came in late at night and his lights always would go in my window, and it would wake me up like an hour after I went to sleep, annoying as hell. He has to come home. The guy's got to go to his house. So blackout shades were the solution. So making those small modifications and knowing what was disrupting yourself, it just takes a couple of weeks to kind of put it all together and try to make small changes here and there. And it's definitely that, and meditation for me have been, look how much I've gotten done in the past few years. Okay. Cognitively, focus, putting projects together, much easier because I'm rested. I also have blood now running through my body, which was quite helpful. But you have to look at all the little things. So the diet, the exercise, the alcohol. I tried to do the nightcap thing, disrupted my sleep absolutely, completely. We don't do that anymore. Being consistent, critically important. Is there any aspect of vacationing or exercise or sleep that we've missed today?
I think we've done a pretty comprehensive review. I'm sure there's a lot of individual type questions people could have, but it's hard to generalize about that. So I think we've covered some good topics there.
Okay. The one thing that I would say, you brought it up earlier about meal size and food on the road. The best part about the summer and the worst part about the summer are the food options, especially if you live in the Jersey Shore area. It's just crap food is everywhere, but it's so good and it's so bad simultaneously. Salt, sugar, and fat. Nod to Michael Moss in his book, but when you're eating on the road, any tips and tricks from the cardiologist point of view of what is a go-to food and what is a no-go food?
So the patients who have seen me have probably heard me say I rarely put anything on the absolute no-go thing, because as soon as I do that, that is all you crave. True. So the idea is always going to be moderation in some sort. If it's donut day and you love donuts, well, be kind to yourself. Have a donut that day, but then moderate your carbs and fats for the rest of the day so the daily total is reasonable, and don't beat yourself up because you had the donut. But don't have a donut 3 meals that day, and we still got a couple left in the pack, so I'll have them tomorrow too. So the idea is you have your indulgence, you adjust your intake around it, and you forgive yourself for being a human being and enjoying life. It's okay to do that. It's okay to have a big juicy burger if you have more plant-based, leaner foods, those kind of things the rest of the day. So that it's really just taking a little bit longer view of it and allowing yourself to have fun without overindulging.
I think the overindulging thing is the critical part. Like if you're going to the Jersey Shore, you're going to have a slice of pizza.
Yep.
It may be the size of your face, but you're going to have some pizza because that's what you do. And you're going to have some Coors ice cream and you're going to have too much dairy that day. That's the way it works. So prepare for it. Watch your sodium if you can. Just remember that there's a lot of salt hidden in these summer fun foods, and that could have a negative consequence on you if you go too high on that. Ross is asking us a question. How do you communicate to your friends and family that after we have this great meal at the, lakeside, whatever, how do you say, I'm going to sit here and wait for you while you guys take your hike or walk because it's not for me?
Well, I think, and you kind of hinted at it earlier, and you've had more experience with that exact conversation in a firsthand way. Yep. But I would say that's part of your pre-planning. If you know, hey, we're going to do something this weekend and it includes this, and we want to go to this great spot for lunch, then you could say, well, we probably should do that physical portion of that activity before lunch, because I'm going to need to rest for a couple of hours afterwards because my body just doesn't respond very well. You just are honest about it, and you try to pre-plan the day to avoid what you know are going to be your triggers. But obviously that is one of the challenges of being a patient with HCM, is some days those triggers aren't as bad as other days. But I think if you're just thoughtful, you set expectations, you try to optimize the schedule to take advantage of your peaks and honor the lulls, then that can be successful.
So there are people in our lives who may not be as open to these conversations as others. And I have encountered a few of them in my life, and it's hard for them to understand sometimes. You can only explain what you can explain, and if they can't hear you, that's their problem, not yours. Don't own their problem. So if you say, I can't do that, and they get upset with you, say, hey, dude, don't get upset with me. Get upset with the anatomy of my heart, and it's not personal. And if they don't understand it, don't let yourself be upset by it. They're not going to get it. At some point in their life, something will likely happen to them that they're not able to function like they used to.
Yep.
Then they may understand you, and some may never get there. Don't worry about how they take the information. Just do what is good for you, and explain to your immediate circle, your children, your spouse, your siblings, this is what I can do. And pretty much anybody outside of that or in that doesn't understand it, it's not your problem, it's theirs. Just do what's right for you. Other topic of the month, because it is June, our primary topic is this whole vacation planning and exercise, but our subtopic is acknowledging grief. Kind of picked that as a subtopic for June because it's near and dear to my heart and all my heartbreak. Most of my family members lost to HCM happened in June. It's just a time to acknowledge that those anniversaries can sting. I've lost my father-in-law, my father, my sister, and my grandfather all in the month of June. A lot of the reason that I'm here talking to you today, Steve, and why we're doing a podcast is because of those losses and what you do with grief. A couple of dear friends of mine are in the midst of grief right now because of recent losses. And grief has phases. And you need to be kind to yourself over how grief is impacting you, your family, your circle. And we don't talk a lot about grief and the grief that we all carry within us. Mm-hmm. We've all had losses. We've all had pain. And I think sometimes we forget that we've all shared that horrible experience and we try to pretend it's not happening. So I'm here to verbalize grief and say that there can be good grief. There can be toxic grief. And there can be grief that leads to change. And I think my grief for my sister specifically has led to specific changes. If you're listening to this, you are part of the change and part of the grief process for me. Steve, any words of wisdom from your point of view as a physician and as a human about grief?
Yeah, grief is a very individual, it's both individual and universal at the same time. So everyone's heard of the 5 stages of grief. And in reality, each person will go through them, but they'll go through them at their own speed and in their own ways. So, she's been very vocal about her various griefs and what she's done about them. That doesn't mean that anyone else listening to this to this podcast is going to do the exact same things or should feel inferior or superior because their grief is just different. It's individual for each of us. But you have to honor the process. You can't deny it because that won't lead to healthy outcomes. So if you've lost someone or you've lost some function or something in your life, you have to honor the fact that loss is there and it's going to have an impact on you as an emotional, psychological human being, and not beat yourself up about it and feel it, honor it, and go through the phases. Some people will once they've been through that, will put things in their rearview mirror and they don't visit it again. Some people seek to make that a mission in their lives. HCMA. I've heard, many other amazing leaders talk about how they changed from a highly successful CEO job to running a nonprofit because of some grief event in their lives or in a loved one's lives. I know of families that specifically celebrate the holidays that their lost loved one would be having, birthdays, anniversaries, those kind of things. And while there might be some tears on that day, it's mostly about celebrating that person and it's about bringing the family together. That's a way those families honor the loss. And that's important to some families. But grief, like I say, it's both universal and individual at the same time. And you need to feel it. You don't need to beat yourself up about it. If you're struggling with it, then this is another example where I certainly encourage people to talk to a mental health professional who can help you sort through your feelings and stages and look for, as you say, Lisa, a positive outlet or transformation for your grief into something else.
I think one of the biggest awareness moments for me about the concept of grief is that we as a society don't want to talk about it because we know it's going to get each one of us. We know somebody close to us is going to leave us at some point. And just that fear of death and separation is enough to send somebody into like a tailspin. Nobody gets out alive, people. None of us. And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. My grief for my dad process very different than the grief for my sister. My dad had an awesome death. And not many people can say that. And I want to normalize saying my dad had an amazing death. He was surrounded by the people he cared about. He got to say goodbye and thank you to everybody that he wanted to, either by telephone, by computer, or in person. And we all got to tell him that it was great to have him in our lives. And Dad drifted away in hospice in my house, and we all had our last words. Yay, Dad. Mom did not go that way. She left in the middle of the night, didn't tell anybody she was going, and poof, she was gone. Much like Lori died, poof, she's gone. And those sudden deaths are different. And each death hits you differently. But you also mentioned something else about grief, and that's for something lost. And many of our family members and clients and patients with HCM are grieving the loss of knowing that they had a healthy heart. And now knowing that they have an abnormally structured heart that's going to require some of their attention. And we've moved HCM into death and destruction to let's fix this up for you as best we can. So there's still grief. I grieved the part of my brain that I lost during my stroke. Like we grieve these different things, but if we talk about what we're grieving, we realize how much we also have. And that we're living in a day where there's a lot of options. HCM is not what it was when I walked into this as a patient advocate in 1995, nor what you walked into as a med student in around the same time. It has changed so much. And that way our grief process from diagnosis should change too.
I would agree, but again, it's also a human nature. I mean, when you were told you're not perfect, that's hard for all of us. Our egos want us to be perfect, particularly in the American culture. The more hardy, the more perfect we are, the better. And when someone tells us or shows us that things aren't right about you, and oh my gosh, it happens to be your heart in this case, there is a normal psychological reaction to that. It happens in various degrees of volume for each patient, but again, don't blow it off and say, it doesn't matter. Accept it and accept that it's going to hurt for a little bit. And then you have to figure out, how do I now deal with this? It is a form of grief, as you've said, to just learn that you have a diagnosis, that you're not perfect. No one is. So we all have our different imperfections.
And we all grieve, and we all grieve different times. And you never know who's in what stage of grief or what's going on. So there is my big message for be kind. You have no idea what somebody's dealing with. And no matter the interaction, whether it's you're checking in at your medical appointment or you're in the food shopping line, you don't know what somebody's dealing with. Just remember that. Remember that you might be having a bad day too. So we need a little bit more kindness in this world, I think. And we're going to do our part to make sure everybody within the HCM community feels heard, appreciated, and that their needs are being met, whether you're in the clinical role or the patient role.
Mm-hmm.
We all are in this together. So as we grieve, we grow. And I wanted to make sure that we covered that next topic. This is kind of why I'm happy June's over. There's so many different dates and times and things and those anniversaries. Ugh, hate them. And everybody has theirs at their own time, their own day. And I still do celebrate Lori's birthday on January 9th every year. And back in 22, we started the Lori Fund, which provides travel grants for those seeking care at HCMA recognized Center of Excellence programs. And I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of pitch that, because the grief that we had for Lori's passing, as time evolves, I think about all of the things that would have made her life easier as a young mom and a patient. And having travel money to go to a center was one of the things that I thought could have been helpful to her, especially as, a young single mom dealing with her own diagnosis. So that's why we created the Lori Fund, and we've been able to provide probably like 20 scholarships now. So if you want to donate to the Lori Fund, you can donate. If you need the services, apply. We want to help you. So grief made that possible. So for those who benefited, you benefited from grief, and that's okay. That's what it's there for. All right, Steve, anything else we should be thinking about for this summer?
I think it's a great topic, and it's important, again, that we all remember to have fun and have time off to recharge and to enjoy our family and to be present in the moment, as you talked about. And then that's what makes getting into the fall fun. And we've got some events coming up in the fall that I think are important and interesting to the community of HCM providers and patients as well.
October 27th will be the HCMA's annual patient meeting, and that will be at the conclusion of a very busy weekend for all of us. Mm-hmm. And that will be the HCM Summit, International Summit 8, which Steve Omen and Marty Marin are the co-chairs of, originated by the extraordinary Dr. Barry Marin. Yep. And now he will be a participant and let the other guys do the work part of organizing all the fun stuff, along with their back team, Emily and partners, putting together a fantastic event. So if you're a medical professional and you want the latest in HCM, the International Summit.
It's the 25th through the 27th. So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There's one event the evening before, and then it rolls right into the HCMA patient event starting Sunday afternoon.
So we're making use of everybody's time being on site. So if you are a patient and you want to register, registration will open very shortly. We're just getting the final touches on that. Agenda has been set with a couple of tweaks here and there we have to make because of availability of speakers, but you'll be able to register starting hopefully Monday, I think. Maybe today, I'm not sure. But if you want to go to this summit as well, that's a little bit more expensive. That's a CME accredited course. Yep. But if you are going to be there as a patient, you are welcome to join us at Saturday night at the summit as a patient representative. And then on Sunday afternoon, we will start our meeting. Sunday morning, there will be clinical trial rooms available for you to learn more about clinical trials that are available. Steve, what are some of the highlights of the International Summit that people are starting to get buzzy and talk about?
Yeah, so again, this is all due to Barry Marin, who started this. These occurred roughly every 3 years. COVID might have upset some apple cart in there in terms of the timing. So this is the 8th time. So, this has been going on for a quarter of a century that Barry started bringing experts from around the world together for a long meeting to get into some of the nitty-gritty and new science and synthesized science and how we take care of patients. So we will obviously talk about diagnostics, the role of genetic testing, those types of things. We'll talk about the new drugs, including new drugs that most people haven't heard of yet and how we think they might be incorporated into patient care. We'll learn about tried and true therapies and recognizing that they're still important for many, if not most patients in their HCM journey. Great conversations. If you are interested in the HCM Summit, our registration is open and in fact it's filling up. So if you're a medical professional who's interested, just search for hcmsummit.org and it's in Boston. It's in a great location, in a great meeting venue. It'll just be a great conversation and great networking opportunities for medical professionals, and then again, rolling into more patient-oriented activities as the weekend concludes.
I've always wanted to have a patient meeting along with the summit. This is the first time it actually kind of worked out to be able to do it. So we're really excited to bring that element to the event. And it has been an amazing. First time I spoke at the summit, I think was 97 was the first one. And then it's every 3/4 years based on terrorists and pandemics.
Yep.
That's pretty much what's thrown it off over the years.
Yep.
Just to give everybody some frame of reference, we were supposed to be in Minneapolis at the summit on September 14th, 2001. And we literally had people stuck in airports all over the world because of obvious events on September 11th. So that was a throw off of the first summit and then the pandemic. But basically, every 3 to 4 years, we all get together and we try to advance knowledge, understanding, in the science of HCM. And I think there's a lot to be said for the trajectory that HCM has taken over the past 25 years and look at what the key elements were to that success. And part of it is the International Summit. So we met regularly. Everybody knew that there was something to report on within 3 or 4 years, and it kept everybody focused on moving HCM forward. And we've done a great job as a community, and it's time to go to the next step and see where we're going to go in the next 20 years in HCM. We've got a lot of young ones to train up there, Steve.
Yeah, it's exciting that the number of young, brilliant faculty members who are interested in HCM it's really just fantastic to see.
That being said, I'll take a very quick opportunity here to say we have been approached by a number of HCM programs around the world who are looking for new faculty. And we really need to develop some of these young minds who might have an interest in HCM to come to the summit and to get involved. And if you think you want to work in the HCM space, literally call me. We need to talk because I've got jobs all over the place and really good programs that are coming into times where they have to think about their future and how they're going to develop for the next generation. So young investigative minds, we need to talk. We need to talk. All right, Steve, anything else we need to say to these people today?
Have a great summer.
Have a fantastic summer. Thank you for joining us on Tales from the Heart. Thank you to all of our sponsors. A big shout out to our friends at Cytokinetics, BMS, Imbria, Tenayo, BioMarin, Edgewise, and our newest publicized partner, which is Viz AI. Together, we hope to be able to get to that diagnosis earlier. And we're going to need technology and we're going to need better systems. So we're looking forward to a lot of really cool projects coming up. So stay tuned when you'll learn more. Steve, thanks so much. Have a great summer. And we are out.
The Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association thanks the following sponsors for today's podcast: Cytokinetics, Bristol Myers Squibb, BioMarin, Tenaya Therapeutics, and Viz AI.